Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is episode number 105.
105.
105.
Oh, there we go. We got them all again.
got 'em all?
But hey, that's why we're here. We're here to chase the truth wherever it runs, even if it's running on numbers. So, no, we're just excited that you're joining with us. Thank you for being with us today, and hope that you enjoy this podcast. And my name is Greg Harris, the senior pastor at Olive Branch Community Church, that sponsors the podcast, and we are just glad you're joining us as we're going to finish off our series called Offended. And my co-hosts are here with me to just kind of make this go wherever it's going to go. Right, guys?
Yeah.
Right.
Wonderful
yeah.
conversations about laundry this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did
More?
you?
Yeah, just the two.
Wow. I will say the laundry thing, probably I got the most comments about. People coming up to me going, can't believe you guys do your own laundry.
There's another one I got more comments about, but I don't want to bring it back up.
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get very many comments
He
on
doesn't
that
want to
one.
scratch that itch.
Yes. All right, Steven.
Well, yeah, thanks for listening. We noticed our numbers coming up on the podcast. And so if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, please feel free to subscribe, hit the bell and the like button if you like what you hear. And we'd love to have your questions answered. So how can they answer questions?
Yeah. And we are trying to get the numbers up. So again, if you don't watch it on or if you watch it on Facebook and you've already subscribed, just get that link, send it to all of your friends, and tell them, hey, do me a favor, just go here and hit subscribe on that.
You don't even ever have to watch it.
Yeah, you don't
again.
even have to watch it.
Wow.
So we want to.
You're just turning people into bots.
We do. I don't care about
really?
authenticity. I just want popularity.
Oh,
Popular. Oh, that's bad.
my goodness. Hey,
So-
who's the one who
keep
doesn't
doing
like
that.
musicals?
I know I am, but I know enough about them to be dangerous.
Ooh.
All right, so my name is Brent. I am the connections pastor here at Olive Branch Church, and we would love not only for you to cheat and have people subscribe, but we would love to hear your comments, your feedback, and your questions, and you can send them to us at rabbittrail@obcc.church. rabbittrail@obcc.church. We would love to get to connect with you and to discuss those questions at length. Now, I came across this stupid Christian's joke thing, so I'm just going to throw
Is it
one
like
out
a coffee
there.
table book? Or?
No, it was a video.
Oh.
And one of the things was, and so I don't know if I should say a couple. I'll just say maybe do one an
you'd be stealing
episode
somebody's
for the
stuff?
next month and a half. But why is Christianity more epic than any other religion?
I don't know.
Because in other religions, you have to do, and Christianity is dun dun dun.
Hey.
Boom, chakalaka.
All right. So
I didn't say they were good.
did
I
you
just
you
said-
made that up?
I'm glad you didn't.
I did not make it up. I heard it.
All right,
so.
I'm going to challenge you
You're
to
going
make
to blame
one
the,
up
the
next
joke
week.
writers.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
You're going to blame the joke writers, or is that?
I'll just find one that I think is funny and say I made it up.
Right.
Because, for cheating on subscriptions, we may as well take credit where credit's not due. I'll be the Milton Berle of Christian jokes. So,
dum.
Joe Coy, write
and-
that joke.
so I will say probably 90% of our listeners are young enough they don't even have a clue who Milton Berle is. And if they know the name, they obviously probably don't even know that.
But they can Google him.
Yes. So
Googly.
again, we are in the offended series. So if I have offended you with my lack of integrity today, suck it up, Buttercup. Whoa, I am in a mood today.
Dum.
Yes, it's a good thing it's done because I'm not doing. All right, so it is the offended series. This was the final sermon in that series, and it was really about confession. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Making it right, making things right.
Yeah. And it's just kind of how to deal with my offense. So last week was how do you deal with somebody else's offense, and that was confronting them. And then this one was more like how do I deal with my offense, and that was the whole if you're gonna give your gift at the altar and realize you're at odds with your brother, leave it there. Go to your brother, make reconciliation with them, and then come back and give your offering. So, when I have offended, it should be my job to go and make restitution and confession and stuff like that.
In fact, what's interesting is Jesus, right after that, I didn't really bring that in, but he deals with like all the lawsuit stuff. He's like, you go quickly to your person who's suing you and then get all paid off as fast as possible. Like settle. Don't go to court or you'll end up in jail for your offenses. Like if you really know you did it, settle now, get it dealt with, pay it back. Don't wait for the law to get involved. Kind of an idea. That was an interest. Never really dove into that deeply either. It was kind of like, Jesus, how would that work out in our current culture? That'd be interesting.
Well, that happens all the time. Yeah,
everybody
I would say most lawsuits don't go to trial. So,
but I mean, like, could you do it even before you get the lawyers involved? Because the lawyers are expensive.
That is true, and I mean, it's usually the lawyers that win. Otherwise they wouldn't be advertising on TV all the time. Which
Or on
really,
those
one thing that
billboards.
drives me crazy, and I may have brought it up on here because it is a pet peeve of mine, right? But one thing that drives me crazy about lawyers and TV is you see this commercial for a prescription drug, and it's supposed to heal this, and then it's got 50. If you've got a runny nose, take this prescription. Okay, some of the side effects could be instant death, and but all this other stuff. So but it's. Aside from that, it is a prescription. It's a legal prescription. You can get it from your doctor. Ask your doctor to recommend it to you. And then the next commercial is, if you're taking this prescription medicine, which is the one that was just advertised,
There's a lawsuit available.
Let's sue the heck out of them. And to me, it's like, if the courts are going to award you money because you're taking this drug, then they should make the drug illegal. It doesn't seem right that it's like, okay, I can still give you this drug, and then you can still sue me. It just that part just drives me crazy.
Sounds like my HOA.
Yeah. Yes. So aside, that was a rabbit trail all on its own and a rant. But okay. So one of the things you said, one of the first top points that you made was reconciliation results from real repentance. So, and I will say this: it's about confession. And the purpose really of confession is to admit that you've done something wrong. Confession, you said, was worthless without repentance. So it should.
So yeah, I'm trying to unhitch, not unhitch them, to actually make them a train car, not make them the same train car, I guess is the best way to put it. Because I think a lot of people think that repentance is confession. Like I confessed, or that's me repenting. Kind of a colloquial.
I said, I'm sorry. Everything should be okay.
Right. I don't know. What have you ran into?
Well, sometimes the people, if you come from a traditional background with Catholicism, confession is just going and saying what you did. And then they give you some prayers to do, and then you're done. So some people do come from that background where if I say the spoken word, then that's really the confession to them. So if you think that way, that's a little different than how we would think about it.
But it would be kind of cool. Like I thought about it, and maybe this was what it was originally intended, but you'd go to your pastor and you're like, I'm confessing this sin I've got. Like, what do I need to do to make it right? And they wouldn't just say, hey, pray these prayers, you'll be good.
Pray them over and over again.
Rather, they're like, okay, well, actually, you need to put off this, and you need here's a list of things that you should begin practicing in your life that can to build that virtue against that vice. I mean, they used to do some things like that.
It's called good therapy. Will do
that
for you.
I mean, back in the 1800s in the Puritan churches, that pastors would do that kind of work. And it was like you went in and they were considered like a spiritual doctor. Like they would come and prescribe you for your sinful ailment. Like here, if you're really confessing and you truly want change, which is what repentance is. So the confession is one thing, the change is the repentance. Then here is the biblical prescription on how to deal with that. And so I always thought that would be way nicer to be like, email your church, your confession, and here's the thing. It's like,
all right. So this leads us down a difficult conversation. Okay. So as a pastor, right? Somebody comes to you and confesses something that they've done to another, whether it be, hey, I've cheated on my wife, or, I have relapsed into addiction and my family doesn't know, or, they've done something wrong. They confess to you.
Yeah.
Number one, I would almost feel like part of the advice would be to go to that person that you've offended and done it. Is it ever appropriate not to? Like, say basically, I've cheated on my wife. She doesn't know. We've had a pretty happy marriage up to this point. I want to repent. I don't want to do that again. I want to get right with God. Is there a way to make that right with God without telling the wife? And then if you tell the wife, you're going to get a divorce. So, I want to protect her, and I'm not saying I'd have. I'm just saying sometimes this is people's mentalities, right? I don't want to hurt her, and I don't want to hurt the relationship because I'm never going to do it again.
Yeah, no. I mean, like, I wouldn't ever. I mean, you've broken your covenant with your spouse, right?
How do you even start restitution if you didn't commit?
There's no going right with God. If you're not going to get right with the person who's made in the image of God and make it right. And the first reality is you have to face what you've done in the wrong. I mean, like, it's not a sin against just God. It's sin against the person, and so your spouse, and so that's the party offended.
No, I've sinned against God and God alone.
Right. Well, that's David's response after Nathan confronts him, but that's his response to God. That's not his response in, like, I don't personally think that David really did what was right after that. He because he hid his sin and because he did these things, you find out that later. There's some weird stuff that happens in that text, but let me pull that up real quick. 2 Samuel, what was it? I think it's, what did I say it was? So
is it
anyway,
20? I don't know.
Yeah, so it's 2 Samuel 12. And what's interesting about it is that, so Nathan tells him that story, and then David, says, hey, we got to get this, this is his answer. He says, the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, you are the man. And then he goes on, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel. I delivered you out of the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives and your arms and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. If this was too little, I would add to you much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil? You've struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword. You've taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never leave your house. And so that's pretty intense because he didn't confess. So again, my problem is, like, if you really want it to go bad, let God bring it out in the open. Like, you're going to get the maximum.
Because your sin will find you out.
Yeah, it will. What is hidden in the scariest verse in my readings is the things that, like, Jesus says, what's hidden, what's kept spoken in secret, it will be shouted on the rooftops. And it's just like, oh, that's gut scary, because I've dealt with people who have been discovered, like, in adulterous affairs or things like that, and my gosh, it's the people who get rid of it and confess. No, it doesn't go well, but it goes oftentimes much better than if they're ever discovered. And because there's just this massive damage. I can't imagine a sin situation where I wouldn't tell the person, you need to go to that person, tell them, and make it right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you've got to. That's just not something you hide.
You did talk earlier in the series, though, about, like, you have to be in the circle of people, right? So if someone online does it to you, you don't even know who they are. You don't, like, track them down to their house and be like, I said something to you online that's inappropriate. So there is some kind of, like, a proximity.
Right. And the relationship has to be there.
You have to have a relationship. It can't just be something that's in your head. Because people walk by and they have an angry thought, but they didn't tell the person, they don't have a relationship with them. Do they confess all of a sudden, like you're standing in line at a supermarket and you kind of go, oh, that guy's rude, and then, oh, that was probably not the right thing to say. Sir, I apologize. Would you say that in line to them when they have no idea what you're talking about and you don't have any relationship with them?
No, I think in those cases you're sinning against God, and that would be something. But I mean, he brought up.
No, I'm just saying you said that there's no scenario in which you would sin against someone but not talk to them.
I guess I'm meaning, like, what he's talking about with sexual sins, that would be.
There are people that get this extreme, right? There's people that take these, what they call extreme vows of honesty, where they go around and just anything that comes out of their mouth they say, and if they apologize for it. So it is a weird thing I've heard people do where they just confess everything all the time, everything that they're thinking to everybody, because they don't want to offend them and they want to get it out in the open. And sometimes like, hey, you said that in your head. God heard that. So you probably should apologize to him and then pray for that person. But you don't have to go around confessing to every thought you had in your head and when someone is in front of you if you don't have a relationship with them.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to be extremely honest and truthful about what you've done or what you're saying. It's another thing just to say everything that comes through your head. I mean, the Proverbs, I don't think would value that. But yeah, back with David, what's interesting is later, I believe it's the either the father of Bathsheba or the related to Uriah. He becomes like one of David's primary adversaries. So I mean, the sin just compounds when he wasn't willing to confess and deal with it. So it's a pretty brutal thing that if you just don't hide sin, don't hide it. You're not hiding it. You think you're going to hide it, you won't hide it. It's going to come out somehow. So I just don't advise that. I mean,
yeah. All right. So again, confession. Really, the reason you would confess, other than the fact that it's what God has called us to do and it's the right thing to do, the purpose of confession really is repentance and reconciliation. Right? I mean, why confess something if reconciliation isn't the point? Right?
Yeah. Well, I think the word confess means to agree with, right? So I really think a confession is a declaration of belief. So like, then you'll find that that's why we do confession is not just something you go into the little box and tell the priest what you did wrong.
It's like when you declare bankruptcy, you shout it out, I declare bankruptcy.
Yeah, no. Okay.
Like that?
Yeah, no, nothing. No.
Oh.
Confession also, however, is practiced in churches where you speak the confession, right? The creeds, and you stand up and you make a confession.
I believe such
like
and such.
when we baptize people, they make a confession of faith. And as we say, upon your confession of faith, I will baptize you. And so what you're doing there is stating your belief. And so when you say that something is sin, that's
I did that.
Yeah, you're saying I did it and I believe it's wrong and I believe it's evil. I also believe that in there should be a connection to emotion, a connected reality that you're saying, oh, this was really wrong. This was evil. I have to agree with this. Like, and this solves that situation. Like everybody wants to go like, well,
I'm sorry.
If Hitler was on his deathbed and he believed the gospel, he would go to heaven. Huh? That's what's going on here? Answer me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he would. I mean, but I don't think he would. I think he would have to stand before God and give testimony of all he did. You know, take account of what he has done.
Well, what kind of fruit would you expect to be seen in somebody like a Hitler that confessed their sin, even if they're on their deathbed? I mean, like, what would you expect to see as somebody like at that level really confess?
Contrition.
Right. It's not word. I think that's the problem is people think confession is a bunch of words. Like I just say some words, magic words, and I go to heaven. I confessed that I've sinned, and I confess that. And it's like, no, like when we're walking through that prayer at the end of a service, like I'm not just trying to give words. I'm trying to give you some structure to hopefully what God's already convicting somebody of in their heart, you know, convicting them of sin and that they need to be forgiven of that sin. And so, yeah, you want to pray through this prayer. But I really do think that like Hitler would have to have like a massive conviction of sin such that it would wreck him, even as a dying person, that he would do any and every single thing that he possibly could imagine to try to make up for the sinister evils that he had done, like in the short amount of whatever time he had. I don't really think that it would just be enough to say, yeah, I believe, and then you're gone. You know, it's like there would be.
We also have a God that knows what true confessions are and which ones are not.
And I do think that, like, if say Hitler was to confess that before his deathbed.
And you don't mean like the fact, because we were talking about Hitler, he shot himself in the head. That's not very contrite. But if he were dying of cancer in this scenario is what you're kind of saying.
Yeah, or even if he had heard the gospel and suddenly was converted and he's in the middle of the Third Reich and trying to lead it, like, what would happen to him? He would have to legitimately, like, there would be a confession of sin, a massive amount of repentance. He would be like,
Well, there'd be a death penalty sentence.
yeah, he'd put himself under the restrictions of the moral court of the world. I mean, like, that's where I'm just, the same thing with a Stalin or any human being. Every human being should have some great reality of weight of their sin if they're truly going to be repentant and that's that confession piece. I feel this and I know it's a sin. This is sin. That's confession. I mean, it's so different than the way I think a lot of people think about it. How about you guys? What do you let you throw?
You have to have the three things. You have to have the words match the actions and match the heart condition. All three of those at some point should be in balance when you start to see it in someone's life, because you can also have the emotions and then never do anything with them. So, I feel so sorry. Oh, you can cry, you punching someone in the face and walk away going, wow, that was really sad. I feel really bad. The next day, you're fine. Don't even think about it. Doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen emotions be the one thing that it can also go wrong. So you kind of need the statement to match up with the emotions, to match up with the actions as well. So then you really know, okay, you're fully in that state. And they don't all come at once. Sometimes you make the public declaration because you're holding yourself accountable to doing those things. You say, like, I will do this, or I believe this, and you fight against the reaction in your body to do the wrong thing, or in your mind to do the wrong thing. You still go, I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah, so I think, like, let's put it in these terms then. I think there's a contrition, there's a guilt, here's an understanding, an emotion of guilt that then crystallizes to a truth, to a reality, to the true reality that I have sinned against this person. I have harmed
take the responsibility.
Them. Yeah. And it's a full responsibility for it, a full understanding of what you've done. There may be an empathy to it. There is a reality that you may not even be able to empathize completely, but you just know it was wrong and evil, which should lead to verbal truth, right? That ultimately should motivate the heart and the body and the person to action called repentance, and which is to turn and stop living one way and start living the opposite of that other way, right? So that's kind of the pieces that I'm trying to lay out. And I think a lot of people, that really is what the people get mixed up with the gospel, because a cheap gospel, right? If you think about it, a cheap gospel is just, I confess that Jesus Christ has died for my sins. I'm forgiven. Those could just be words.
And this is why when you talk to people in ministry, you celebrate with them, but you also know, like, you have to join the family and you have to be connected. And so you're rooting for them. You're coaching them through their faith. You don't just, like, say the magic words. Now just fend for yourself.
Right.
And
so
I think
that's why most churches have a backup plan to make sure you're being cared for all the way into the kingdom.
And I think that part of that too is that idea of words are cheap, and so the whole saved by faith, you're saved by faith, not by works, which we adhere to and we believe. But that's why James seems to oppose that, right? Where it's like, no, you show me your works, and then I'll believe your faith, your statement, basically. And so James is basically saying, no, your actions are the proof of what you say.
They're the fruit of the repentance.
And live in a manner that your profession is true.
So if you're calling yourself a Christian and there's not fruit in your life that shows the evidence of your salvation, then you might want to rethink of, your position a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, for the gospel's sake, like, okay, so there's a difference between my confession to Stephen or you, Brent, like, I've done something wrong, and I come to that contrition, like, there's a sudden feeling of guilt and shame about what I've done, and I resolve that this has been a sin. It's now time for me to declare that to you, and then here is what I'm going to do to show you I'm changing, and I don't want to do this anymore, right? So that's that act of contrition, confession, and action of repentance. With God, there's something more there, though, because you can't just go, oh, God, I'm so sorry. I feel really bad about my sin, and you forgive me, right? I'm going to move on. I want to live a new life. I'm going to do these good things. Because how do you know he forgave you? Well, the answer has to be not this, oh, God forgives, and that's great. It's that, no, I've paid for you. And this is another important aspect of Christian theology that a lot of people mix up. Like, we talk about guilt and we talk about shame, and we kind of wrap those two things into an emotional context. And shame has a lot of bad connotation in our current culture, rightly so in some ways, that there is a wrong form of shame. But guilt is actually, it's called, the word is forensic, which means like in the legal world, it is actually something that you've done. You can't actually ever stop being, quote, guilty. Once you're guilty, that's what you've done. You're always guilty, right? Does that, you guys understand that? And so when it comes to Christianity, we know that when you've made an offense, when we talk about guilt, it's not just the emotion that I feel bad about it, that I've come to realize my guilt. It's that I know that I've done something wrong, and that is a wrong. I've violated the rules, the law. I violated the relationship. There is no point at which the rest of your life you will not be guilty for that thing. But shame is the emotion that you would feel about the guilt, where you're like, I'm ashamed of myself to do that. And if you're not careful, shame's the thing that will keep you from going and confessing and dealing with it, because you can become shameful, which means that you may be guilty, but you're filled with a sense of like, I am a shameful being. I am a horrible person. And that's the beauty of the gospel. Jesus comes along, he says, you may be truly full of shame. You may be truly guilty, but on the cross, I will take the penalty. I will pay for the guilt. I will pay for the eternal restitution before God. And God looks at what Jesus does and says, here, I give you his righteousness, so all the guilt on your ledger looks like it's on Jesus, and all the good on his looks like it's on yours. And that's that great exchange. That's what opens that door to say, I'm forgiven, if you'll trust that gift. And this is very technical and not easy to always explain when you're trying to do an altar call or something to somebody. So I don't even...
I just think we have a very modern notion of how that works, because most people say, like, I had this feeling and this experience and I said these words, so therefore that's my salvation moment. But I've noticed that isn't everyone's experience all the time. Like when you look at someone like C.S. Lewis, who was like, I was wrestling with the truth and I didn't want this to be true. And so he's fighting. And then he realizes, I need to surrender to this thing. It wasn't a positive experience of a euphoria for him, because I think he knew, like, I have to count the cost of what this is gonna mean if this is true and how I've lived my life. And that was a painful process for him. Others, it's like the most happiest thing forever. I've been forgiven. But it's still the same actions, in the sense that you realize at some point that this is true, that Christ died for your sins. He is the Lord of the world. He took your penalty. And people respond to that emotionally different. All of them surrender at some point and confess. That's what's required. But some people, it takes longer, and others, it's like an instantaneous moment. So even when someone comes to the altar, the idea is that you want to make sure they understand what they're doing and what is happening to them, and so they don't get into a cult, or they don't get into an odd situation, or that they fully realize what the Lord is doing in their life. But oftentimes I think so much weight is put on the confession, like just the words, that people go, oh, so many people came to the Lord. I'm like, I remember going where people are coming to the altar all the time, and it's like the same person asking for salvation every Sunday morning. At some point, no one ever asked the person, like, do you know what you're doing? Like, and so that's the idea is there does need to be a church conversation with that person to affirm where they're at in their life and to help them grow. And if we only focus on that pitch, that you said it, now you're in, everything's good, without actually joining the family and being a part and talking with them, then I think that does people a disservice. And it comes coming from the idea that people didn't have a lot of time, and they would just pitch, are you born again? And then people go, no, yeah. And then they had a frame of reference because they either went to church or didn't. Now you have to unpack, because no one has a frame of reference for church a lot more than you used to make sure people truly understand what they're doing. For some individuals. Others, it's like, I get it. I know what's going on.
Well, and
we're ready to go.
No, you're right. I think that there was somebody pointed out that Billy Graham was capable of being very successful in the time period he was, because there was a Christian haunting still in the background, and that people knew they weren't doing what they should do, and he was able to just bring that out, draw it out with the Christian truth and bring it home. There's a lot of people who claim today, like, you have to do a lot of more hard work to even kind of help people see that there's this thing called sin, and that you've done something wrong to somebody. We're so lenient and so free, like, just, you did that, and that's why That's why sin runs rampant, right?
And the standard is vertical, not horizontal, right? Where you're looking at everybody else going, I'm not that bad, and that reframe that to think more vertically in that. Well, one of the things you said, and I kind of want you to, for people that didn't maybe hear the message, touch on it, and then I've got a question for it. But you were talking about confession and forgiveness and feeling the guilt of it, right? And you were basically saying if you've gone to God and He's already forgiven you and wiped your debt clean, but you can't forgive yourself, that you're looking at the wrong God, in that sense, like basically you were saying that you feel like you're God because you have a higher standard of forgiveness in that sense than God does. I just want you to clarify what you were saying there, because I thought that was pretty good thing. And then I've got a question on that.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen, feel free to interrupt me as I'm going, because this is like a pretty sensitive subject for a lot of people, like the idea that I can't forgive myself. And the idea behind that, I just known people when I talk to them, what happens is they're like, no, I've just done too much bad. I can't forgive me. It's like, well, do you believe that God has forgiven you? And they're Christians like, oh yeah, I believe God forgave me, but you can't forgive yourself. No, I can't. I could never. And you're like, okay, that's where I want to say, I think you have the God in the wrong spot. You have the wrong God. If God can forgive you of your sin, and it's almost like, well, of course He can forgive me. He has to forgive me. And you got to remember, He doesn't have to forgive you. He wants to forgive you. He doesn't have to forgive you. But if you've confessed it, you truly know it's sin, and you've asked Him to, then yeah, He's forgiven you. And what that looks like is, like we said one week, where it's like, when were you saved, right? Christians will go, oh, when I walked down the aisle and I gave my life to Jesus. Okay. But do you realize you were really saved when Christ bore your sins on the cross, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Well, but you're also not quite saved yet, because there's going to be a day where you're standing before, the judgment seat, and He declares not guilty. And boom, now you're really saved. You've been truly we're so trusting that God's going to do that, because He doesn't break His promises, that we can say, yeah, I'm saved now, because the result is current. But the same thing goes with with what we're talking about in the sense of this idea. And I've just kind of way lost it. Drive me back.
You got the wrong God if you can't.
Oh yeah, wrong.
Yourself.
So that lack of being able to forgive yourself, I think, is people going like, oh man, yeah, God has to forgive me. He has forgiven me, but I know who I am. I have to pay the consequences. I got to do something. And what you're doing is you're playing judge. You're playing the guard of the jail. You're saying, I have to be the one who pays this back, and I'm unforgiven until I do these things. And people feel guilty, and they think they have to stay there, because honestly, they're not releasing themselves from being the judge.
I don't deserve to be set free.
Right. And so I say that's shame. I think that's an unhealthy
and there is
level
truth.
Of shame.
You don't deserve to be set
right.
free.
But God has valued you such that He loved you. And so you are not unlovable, right, though we are filthy. We are not unsavable, though we have done horrible things. We are not unforgivable, though we have sinned. And for you to sit there and say, yes, but God can, but I can't, is again to take God's gavel out of His hand and say, I still declare I'm guilty. I'm guilty. And God's going like, who are you? Like, if I forgive you.
It's easy for you to forgive me, but I've got higher standards.
Right. And He's the highest standards. So I think that the difficulty is to work yourself to the place where you really believe that the thing that you've done has been paid for by Jesus, and B, that you have released yourself, that you say, well, I know I've done bad things, and I'm going to put myself in the court of God. Now, I'm going to take a caveat here for 1 second, and I believe that if you still feel guilty about something, though you've gone to God and you confessed your sin and you've worked through that, it may be because you haven't finished off the rest. You haven't gone to the person and made it right. You haven't gone to the one you've sinned against, and you haven't turned and actually started to walk in the freedom and walk in a new living, in a new life. I do think you can get caught in just, well, God forgave me, but I haven't made it right. Yeah, I haven't stepped out. And because that guilt isn't there that shame and guilt isn't there to hold you. It's there to energize you to change. It's there to remind you, you don't want to do that. You want to do this. You want to move forward. And so oftentimes when I'm struggling with guilt or struggling with shame, whatever's going on in my life, one of the things I've been taught and trained in is flip it into something that is energizing you to fight harder, to do the good forward. Turn it into motivation, not into a shame spiral, and I'm so horrible and I can never forgive myself. It's like, no, God forgave me. He's picked me up, cleaned me off, put his spirit in me. Now it's time to get moving. Go, make it right, keep moving forward. And I think that remembering that these emotions don't exist to hold you. Emotions exist for a purpose. They have an intention. They are emotions. So go ahead, Stephen.
Well, it's a bit like you're locked in a prison cell because you did something wrong. Someone else pays the debt and opens the door, and you choose to stay inside the prison cell. Is that not disgraceful for the person who paid the price? And so the idea to me...
Oh, but now I have more guilt.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. If you truly understand that someone gave you a gift of freedom when you didn't deserve it, not exercising the gift of freedom is kind of a slap in the face to the person who set you free. And so you have to accept the gracious gift. And if you reject the gracious gift, you stay in the prison cell. And so to me, that's my worry is do you understand the grace of God is forgiving you of that wretched sin? Or do you need to now punish yourself more than God would punish you and take his grace and push it away? Because you have to say, no, I'm going to stay in the cell even though the door is open. And he's like, wouldn't it be better if you were thankful for what happened and went into the world and loved other people the way you were loved with the gracious gift? So to not do that is to put yourself in a bondage that's not only unnecessary, but also kind of slaps the face of the person who set you free. Mm-hmm. Because he did pay that price for you. He took the penalty. He took the prison cell, and he took that on himself. And so you have to be like, thank you. Now I understand what you did for me. I'm not going to hold it. He would be hurt if you held it against him, against yourself, because of the fact that he did it for an act of love for you. So if you truly understand that, you draw close to the throne room of grace. So the idea is, if you feel that way, go out and live that way. I was forgiven. I'm going to forgive other people. It should spur the idea that you want to restore people back to the person who forgave you. And that's usually what I think James is saying. He's saying, if you truly understand what happened to you, you're not going to be like, I'm going to sit in the prison cell or I'm going to take it for granted. You're going to punish yourself more. You're not going to punish yourself less. Someone else took the punishment, and that's what you have to realize. And so for me, it's really a lack of understanding grace.
And now you're going to go live out that new way of living. So
it's a gracious gift that someone paid for you. And he says, I did it because I loved you. And you're like, you didn't deserve it, but I love you. You don't go, well, I don't love me, and so therefore I'm not going to accept your gracious gift. I'm just going to go live the way I was before you gave it to me.
Yeah.
That's sad. That's a sad thing to do to yourself. And so I would say live free, and every time you feel guilty, thank God.
So how would you also parse or differentiate between not forgiving yourself and not drowning yourself in guilt, but getting past a horrible situation, right? So the horrible memories of what you did. So as an example, there was a friend of mine in high school student. We're all just new drivers, right? He's driving down the freeway on a rainy day. Somebody was broken down on the side of the road of the freeway, stepped out around their car, and he hit him and killed him, right? And I mean, I remember he was like gone from school for a month, and we're like, hey, what's going on? He was ghosting everybody. But he was just never the same after that, And so in one sense, it wasn't like a sin that he needed to confess for because he wasn't drunk or doing anything stupid. But the idea that you carry that weight with you the rest of your life, and even though you go to God and ask for forgiveness and he takes that, how do you get out from under that crushing weight? And I mean, and I don't know if that's not forgiving yourself because you are under that weight. If it's saddling yourself with guilt because of that situation or just that trauma, how do you differentiate all that?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say that I've got, I'm just going to tell you exactly what I got right. Yeah, no way. That's such a huge and heavy topic because you're dealing with so many aspects. Like you do have the trauma, right? You have that's just an intense, horrific situation that's going to burn into your brain. Just, I can't imagine every time it would rain, I'd be freaking out, right? I mean, just there's.
And how many times do you relive that moment in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's a horror. That's what real horror, I think, is about. Now, what I do think is that, like, okay, yeah, you can work through kind of with God, whether there was any sin or not involved in there. But then I think that turns more into a suffering question. Like, God, why did that happen? Why did, now you have to really wrestle on that side. And, again, there's a nuance though in there that's like how you take hold of that and interpret like what's going on. Like, is God doing something to bring, like, there's just an intense sobriety to it, right? When I think about it, it would just be like life could either become extremely dark or it could become extremely serious. And there's a difference between an earnest person who has gone through suffering and processed their suffering, that life is a very earnest thing. You don't mess around with it. Horrible things can happen, and therefore we need to be the best agents that we can for the gospel and good. I mean, it could be a changing motivator to where every time, it's just how are you going to process that through? There's going to be the pain, there's going to be the obvious memories, but can you process those memories in such a way that they become a motivation for a greater thing in the world? What if your friend had processed through that and with good counseling and conversations with pastors and others came to the realization that, yeah, you know what, I'm always going to walk with this weight. I'm always going to limp around with this trauma in my life. But what I'm doing is I'm going to allow the Lord to take it and motivate it, that every time I see someone, like, man, that could have been me walking out of the side. That could be that guy. But did they know the gospel? Did they know the gospel? Like, I'm going to be, it's going to fuel me to not miss any opportunity and to take every chance I can to make sure that the next person is prepared for an accident like that. Or, maybe they motivate into like safety and driving in the rain. There's all these kinds of things. People do these kinds of things, but I do think something that intense, you do need to forgive yourself in the sense of like, okay, it was an accident, but also if God has forgiven me, then now what do I do to live? Because I'm the one alive, right? And not to ignore it. I don't think you should ever just skip away and like, because that would be almost dishonoring to the person who was made in the image of God. That's why I say living with an earnest sobriety, a very sense of the weightiness of life. I don't think that should really necessarily leave any of us. We should all live that way normally, but something like that may be actually something that empowers a person versus destroying them. Stephen, you in counseling stuff, I don't know what would
it'd be difficult because you'd have to know the details, and I do think this is where the details matter. Oftentimes people feel guilty in two ways: irrational guilt and irrational guilt.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, and so the idea is there is something you actually did to cause the death of someone. Were you careless? You're going to have to think through whether you were careless or not. Not a lot of people can answer that unless the court's going to answer it for you. If it was something careless, then you do have something to repent over, and there is usually court cases and things that you go through. The judge may be gracious to you, but you're probably going to need to have some restitution towards the family. Usually they sign a letter saying, I did this, these are my actions, I have remorse, this is what I'm going to live my life by. So if there are some culpable reasons why you're feeling guilty. Now, if it was legitimately an accident, that's a different scenario to me, because it wasn't intended, but it is part of your responsibility to try and bring some restoration and some value to the life that was lost. So you don't want to be like, well, it wasn't my fault. You know what I mean? That you're going to feel guilt because the weight of a human death should feel heavy, because it's not something that you should take lightly. And so this happens in war, friendly fire and things like that. The reason why you go through counseling is because you did not intend this to happen, but it did happen at your hand. And so there is some responsibility in how much I take on that weight, because that did result with your hand. But there are things that aren't. They're like, you're at war, you're doing the right thing, and we live in a world where bad things do happen. So a real grounding in reality, and these details are going to matter, is to say, is this a realistic expectation of grief or guilt, or is this not? And then a lot of people will do things like, if I didn't even mean to, but I know that it came at my hands, I'm going to donate to the family. I'm going to care for other people to show that I respected the life that was lost, in as much as the family will allow. And once you do that, then you can kind of go like, I have made my peace with this, and now you have to have a counseling session to kind of go through making sure that you're not living your life in vain, or you're going into false guilt for the rest of your life. Because now, if you die, then there are two casualties. If you bring yourself to the point where you don't want to live, then now two people of a bad incident are suffering. And I don't think God wants that for you. I think God likes to take stories that start with pain and end up towards blessing, even if it's something that you did at your own hand. So you look at Paul, he felt this whole urge. The reason why he was able to endure is because he knew he didn't deserve to be in the position God placed him in. And so it fueled his ministry to care for people more, because he was like, I don't deserve any of this, but I'm going to do it with all my heart because I have an opportunity to produce a good for the Lord.
Do you think there was ever a moment where Paul sat alone and just wept over the people he killed?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Because he talks a lot about it.
And I think that's what drove him. I think,
it's a part of what drove him, yeah. But understanding that he was forgiven, yet didn't mean that. You imagine he preached at a church where somebody that he killed's family still went there. That must have been very, very difficult. You know what I mean? And then the fact that so much of the Acts talks about Stephen, and then Paul was heavily influenced by the death of Stephen. So he's like, that must have torn at him, like, now that I have to preach his message to other people, you know what I mean? And so he had to believe that God forgave in some ways, but he didn't mean that he was like, yeah, I'll just take it flippantly. It made him more zealous to do good with the remaining time in his life. So he was like, I'm going to do the most because I've been forgiven with the freedoms that I have.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, I also think that, part of what you were talking about in the service as well is you were talking about to really confess, right? You have to feel the weight of what you've done.
I really think you got to know what the sin is too. Yeah.
And really just, understand the weight of what you've done, understand the consequences that has caused on the other person. And then you brought up Deuteronomy too, where, it was basically, talking about confessing and then making restitution of
that's
1/5.
the book of Numbers. Yeah.
Is that Numbers? Oh yeah, Numbers. Numbers 5, chapter 5. Confess and make restitution of 1/5, or 20%, right? And so I could imagine, when you feel the weight of that, like Paul, how do you not only confess it, but make restitution for it, and then go above that 5%, And I do feel like that was part of what he kind of talked about in his ministry, was basically, listen, because of what I've done, I know I am going to suffer. I will live a life of suffering.
There's some interesting aspects to Paul's life that aren't written down. I'm curious to know if we could look into the text and find anywhere that he talks a lot about. He seems to talk about the fact that he doesn't really have anything. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed. He's not like a guy who has money, but yet he would have been a man with significant wealth if he's under Gamaliel and living.
I don't know how the wealth works.
I mean, up in Tarsus, and he's a citizen. Like, you don't get to be a citizen without having some kind of
his father must have had some status.
So
give him under Gamaliel.
I'm curious if he didn't just give everything over to the church to say, give this to the families. Like, maybe that doesn't show up in the text, but it's not beyond my comprehension of his actions being willing to do that. However,
or to become that apostle too, he would have had to walk away from his, his position and walk away from everything else. So he would have been an outcast.
Absolutely.
And probably an outcast to his family as well.
But when we talk about like an emotional world in which, like, say I've lied to you, how do I give back, 20% more truth? Like, I mean, I liked what you said. Like the other day you ran over your neighbor's cow. So,
yeah. I'm joking, by the way, people, but no, I was saying, with that verse of giving a fifth more or 20% more, it's like, what do you do? If you're driving down the street and you run over your neighbor's cat, you go over, you confess, you apologize, bring them a new cat, and then a fifth of another cat. That would horrify their children. Here, play with this.
yeah. What part was the fifth?
So
it's a cat nugget.
So PETA, calm down.
Oh, are they listening now?
I don't know.
Great. So I think that's that process where when you talk about repentance, bearing fruit with repentance, like, okay, so I've lied, but you know what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to become the person who I'm going to tell you the truth. And now I'm also on top of that going to add into my life the attempt. The fifth is like, this is the law. When we talk about,
it was specific to their time.
Right. We're talking about, and this is about like things that are stolen and other things it'll get into that. But I do believe that if it's like a lie or something, then you become a truth teller. You practice telling the truth, and you say, I'm like, I was trying to say that, like when I was talking about making fun of my wife and it was just kind of realizing, that's really disrespectful and hurting. And so, but then saying, what I'm going to try to do is I want to become more of an encouragement to you, and I'm going to actually do it in front of the kids on purpose. And I'm actually going to do it to other people because I want to now practice that muscle, not just with you, but with everyone, so that I don't continue to be that kind of a person. Because if I can do that to my wife, I possibly could be doing that to other people, right? So that would be like how I envision the idea of like that, making restitution, and then that step beyond to fill in that gap is like, I'm going to go above and beyond to make it right.
I know we like numbers, but like
the book or
no, when some people don't like numbers, the book. No, I'm talking about like we always think of what's 1/5 mean, and then we start looking at it like it's a math class or some kind of modern
It is
law.
1/5 of a cat.
Yeah.
Now when it says like,
but
when you confess, bring a fifth, and that's not like alcohol, right?
No.
Okay.
That would be a wholly different party.
Yes.
Yeah,
that would not be a holy party.
Yeah.
That's just a different party.
So most of the times people pluck those scriptures out. They pluck it out of the context. So there's very similar verses in Exodus chapter 22 where it's saying like, oh, if you steal a sheep, you pay this amount. And then, but if you steal an ox, you pay this amount. And they're like, what's all the differences in this? These are principles. You're supposed to look at these and go, well, there's lots of sheep. But if you take someone's ox, they can't work for like a day or a week. And so what you did cost that person more. And the law recognizes that. That's where the numbers come from. Yep. And because they might change later on because you're living now they're in tents. Later on, they might be in a city. So the punishment might change, but the principle won't change, that there are certain things that you do that have a heavier effect. Now, if I accidentally scratched your car, that's not the same as kidnapping your child. You know what I mean? So the idea is that the law recognizes that. You should too. So if I say a rude comment to someone, and I've only done it once, and it's not a part of my habit, I don't have to do above and beyond something ridiculous to prove to that person that, we need to be restored. So that allows me to go like, no, I think we've come past this. So in the restitution laws, the idea is you can't go to prison for like 10 years to pay off someone if you're wandering through the wilderness. So what the restitution did is it allowed you to immediately pay the person that you suffered and go back to work and be productive. So the idea is that we need everyone to go out and do good. If we lock them away, how are they going to learn to do good? So what the restitution is know what you do when you hurt people. And when you hurt people, what it costs them. And then when you realize that, pay that back. And then go back and do good and work. And so that's the thing I think that I like about the biblical context is it's not going to make you a slave to that person. And it's also not going to make you someone that's just flippantly doing whatever they want to anyone in society. They're trying to educate the people of Israel on the weight of what they do and how it affects the community that they're in. So that might take some creativity. And this is why I do like the idea of the church being involved. I hurt this person and I've done it several times. How do I fix this? And I do think that is a communal process. That we think of this as judicial because we remove our judges from society. These were their family members and judges and people in the family. Ezra, so it's the family sitting around with judicial power determining what the proper punishment, because they know these people. We've made our laws distant from their people. They didn't do that. And so this is more like a church. The church does have these responsibilities of being involved, and typically people wait till the infractions are done and then they ask the church for help. And it's probably easier to strategize how to help you first and then go in and try to do the restitution, then waiting until you screwed it up and then going, hey, church, help me. And so I think that what it's saying is, at the very least, bring your family and church into this process, your trusted people that you have in your life, to say, how do I make this right? Because we're not always creative enough, but the principles are there. The principle is you do appropriate to the means by which you've messed up their livelihood. But you also have to go back and be productive. So,
and again, I think
I like that principle.
Yeah, I like the principle because it does fight against this kind of simplified version of just, I can say sorry and I won't do that anymore. Like, I can see my kids saying that, right? But as an adult, is there a point at which we're supposed, I mean, like, it needs to go beyond what we would say is like just not doing it anymore. It's like, well, not doing something, as I said, an abstinence isn't
a virtue.
Abstinence isn't repentance.
Right. It's not the same thing. And so that, I mean, have you guys ever struggled with that thought? I mean, I have. I mean, just kind of thinking that, if I just stop doing this, then I'll live well. But instead of like, oh no, I need to actually actively turn around and do something else.
I heard it explained once before, is like our bent is towards sin, right? And so again, if we are just into behavior modification, right? It's kind of like you've got this ship on autopilot going across the ocean, and you turning that wheel the other way, and holding that wheel to go the other way. At some point, like you mentioned, white knuckling it, right? But at some point, you're going to be fatigued and you're going to let go of that wheel and it's going to go back the other direction again. Where, behavior modification isn't repentance and transformation, right? So really, God is in the business of transforming our minds, transforming our nature, and making us a whole new creature, so that autopilot is redirected and not just your behavior is changed, your character is changed.
I think that's one of the best proofs that you've really been transformed by Christ, is that when you do go towards sin, the white knuckling is different now.
Yeah.
You're like, you almost have to, you're holding on to it.
You're white knuckling not to sin, not white knuckling not to sin.
It's like, I think that literally if you're sinning, there is a sense that that's what the guilt is. It's it's the autopilot trying to write itself back to your transformation towards Christ. And so now you're going like, it's unnatural to sin. And I think that's the most interesting thing when I talk to when I talk to a non-Christian or talk to a Christian. It's like I remember that a lot of things that now in my life I'm like, that's just sin. It's like, I mean, like, even if I find myself doing it, whatever, it's like, no way. That's like so contrary to my internals. When before it was like no big deal. Like, I didn't care. It's like, that's what you do. Like,
as long as people don't find out, I'm good.
Yeah. It's like, and so that transformation of that turn where suddenly it was opposite, where it's like, oh, now it's not easy to sin. It's there and it's pushing you back. That is a true existential, like, personalized reality that I don't understand. I can't explain that. It was easy before, and it was like, I didn't feel guilty about it. It just happened. Sure, maybe I felt like, oh, that was not good because everybody told me that's not good, but whatever. And now it's completely different.
And I will say too, some of it is practice too. And you mentioned it earlier, briefly, but also the scriptures never tell you to stop doing something without telling you to start doing something else, right? I mean, they don't tell you to take off something without putting on something.
Thank
right?
goodness.
Huh?
Thank goodness.
Well, yeah, like, to me, I just think, like, especially even in counseling, they used to think way back when people weren't actually using science or anything in counseling, that if you just discovered the problem, that somehow that would fix it. So, the reason why you did this is because when you were a kid, you were abandoned. Problem over. Catharsis experienced, right?
All right. I got to the root of it.
Yeah.
I'm healed.
Yeah, and what they found out is that didn't work at all. It didn't change the behavior. Sometimes it made the behavior worse. And once they started figuring out, well, what really does work? Well, it was actually examining what it is you're doing that's substituting for something else. And I think this is kind of very much more biblical of the model. The idea is that usually we're sinning because we believed some kind of falsehood that says that this is actually good, and that it's the real good that you really want. So instead of love, it's lust. Instead of this, so typically you have to find out when we're sinning. The best thing to do is find out why was I doing that? That's good, but what should I be doing instead of that? And if you remove somebody's ability to do something right away, and they don't change their mentality, their thoughts, and they don't correspond to the reality of Scripture, they'll just find another habit to cling on to fill the need again. And that's because we're meant to live out and create in the image of God the virtues of his own character. And so that's why instead of abstinence is just the absence of not doing something bad, but chastity is pursuing holiness to be like God in the best way you can, given the condition that you're in. That's a doing and being like Christ. And we even have a model for that. As a Christian, you have Christ himself, who was a single man who had a really well-lived, the best-lived life. And so the idea of chastity was to be as much like Christ as possible. And so the idea of, like, if I take something away from someone, and we have a Christian version of this, it's called identifying sins. I read this scripture verse. This says you're doing this sin. Problem over. Just repent. And I'm like,
just confess it with your words.
Just confess it with your mouth. I've unlocked the catharsis. And you're like, that is very much like the Freudian view of catharsis. And it doesn't work because you can't just point out sins. Jesus didn't say, like, he's like, you sin, right? Yeah. Where are your accusers? They're gone. All right, okay, now don't sin anymore because you have a relationship with me. He made it so relational now. Now it's not like I have to do all these bad things. It's like now you have someone rooting for you to do good things. And I've literally talked to people who when they're talking about that voice in their head, the more you read scripture, the more you understand who God is, the more you have that voice in your head. People literally remember who just got saved. They didn't have that voice not that long ago. It's like I want to do this. And the little voice in the back of your head says, is that what God would want you to do? And you're like, oh, that voice wasn't there before. And for us who have been Christians for a long time, we're used to that voice. So we just kind of ignore it and move away from it and pretend like it's not there to do the thing. But it's always there. And the more you feed that, to me, is the more you're replacing the good and being the good that God wants you to be like him.
And I think this is where that, I don't want to say that we don't, and you weren't saying this, but I just want to make it clear. That wasn't clear, but I want to make this clear, that we're not saying don't identify the sin. In fact,
it's important.
It's so critical because you need to apply the right actions in opposition to the sin. There's been a sin in my life that I've wrestled with for years and years and years, and I've always thought it was one particular thing, right, in the zone. And I realized only during this message, while I was applying it like crazy, that it was idolatry, like legitimately, like dealing with an idolatry in my heart. And I'm like, and it was like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm running to this sin for things that only God can give me. And it was just like, well, what's the practices? Well, obviously start practicing running to God for these things. Start practicing asking him for these things and engaging with him. It's just like, and so sometimes it's the most elementary things that you learned in, we should have learned in children's ministry that just blows you away later. But it really is so critical to get that sin identified correctly so that you can move in the right directions against it. And also so that you don't have false guilt because false guilt's just like, I feel guilty. Well, what did you do? I don't know. That's not bad. What you said there isn't, who made you feel like that was bad? It's like, you need to know what that sin really, really is.
Yeah. And a lot of it too, is just identifying the problem. Like, if you were abused, as a child or, young, a lot of times you become an abuser because you felt like you had lost control at one point, and that the manifestation of that sin is the fact that you're trying to regain control. And so you can either try to do something out of your brokenness in a healthy direction or continue it in an unhealthy direction. And if you're going in a unhealthy direction, it is always going to bring more pain and more of a loss of control in your life. And so again, letting God redeem that issue in your life.
So in a case of like abuse where you're abusing somebody else, let's say it's like anger, you're angry and you're abusing. Yeah, I could say that it's you could draw it back to the root of control, right? But what's the sin? It's a different question, because the need is to have control, but the sin is the actual violence, the abuse, is disrespect of others. And so the reverse has to become that you start practicing a respect of someone, speaking respectfully, saying respectful things, seeing the good in another person. That may take a journaling, that may processing anger so that it moves towards dealing with whatever the need is. So
the lack of surrendering to God's sovereign will too. You have to realize you're not in charge of your life, and maybe you think you have more control than you think you do. Yeah. So you need to surrender it to God. People respond differently to the same stimuli. Some person might be completely being attacked over and over again because they got used to being trained to be a victim, so they stay one. Right. That also would be like, you don't respect the image of God. You need to learn that that's what God created you, not to be abused, but to be good works and to do good things, and no one should abuse you. So it's different things hit people differently. That's why it is important to identify what am I using this sin to do? What lie do I believe? And that's usually what it is, because did God really say that? You need to take this into your own hands and fix this problem, or work out of this need or this desire, because it usually is a desire. I desire love, and so people go and do bad things because they have a good desire. And I think that's what we all empathize with, but we can't excuse it because it is self-harm. It is harming oneself. Mm-hmm. And so we in the world would say, well, we all have that desire, so it wasn't a bad thing because everyone has these natural desires. I'm like, yeah, but they're not all good for you. So and so the idea is, if I really cared about you, I would point out that unbent desires towards something bad bring harm to everybody, including yourself. Why would you encourage that? Because we all have a common experience. I thought we want to make each other the best that we can be, and that means you have to have an objective understanding of life. So.
All right. Well, that's a lot to chew on. So, send us questions at rabbittrail@obcc.church. If you want us to address something else in this vein. We got a new sermon series coming up, right? Or we're going into 1 Peter?
Yeah, that'll be in a couple. We're doing just a one-off, kind of a special, actually a point, like a 0.6, like it's just a kind of a throw-on addition. But it's going to be talking, I'm using the offense terminology, but we're going to talk about like the idea of the most offensive thing in the Bible. And so we'll kind of look at that and why it's kind of hard for us to wield what that offensive thing is. So
right. Stay tuned.
This picks up right after 2 Peter, right?
And we're going to jump then into 1 Peter.
And 1 Peter.
Yeah, we're going to be back in 1 Peter. It's called Contrast. We're going to be looking at kind of how to live life in light of in light of the world around us. And so how do we stand out rightly, even if the world is really pressing in on you and kind of pushing on you. So to really contrast and look different.
So again, we got a question from Nate, and he asked this. He says, how do we not put our culture in the Bible? And I'm guessing when we're reading the Bible and trying to interpret Scripture, how do we not interject our present culture
he was saying, like,
the Scriptures?
This is my son, so he was saying, like, hey, how do you always say that we read love wrong into the Bible? So, like, how do we not do that? And then and
then he said, how do we learn what they meant and then apply it today? So, that kind of like textbook, okay, follow the reader, what would the listener of that mean, understood that to mean, what would they have thought? And then we can bring it in our culture, where instead now many people just try to read the Scriptures and cram it into our culture without any historical reference and then try to interpret Scripture through today's headlines. So what say you?
Oh man, I also would like to add to that, though, because I'm curious. People who feel like they don't need to know the context of the Scripture because they have the Holy Spirit only. So that'd be another kind of caveat to it, where I don't need to know what these guys thought back then because I have the same Spirit that talked to them, and so I don't need to know the context of the early Scriptures.
Sure. Okay. So
I think they're similar in nature to me.
They're very big, different answers in a lot of ways, but
it's really to me like a hermeneutics question.
It's written in English. I understand English, therefore I don't have to do much.
King
study.
James wrote it in 1611 with Paul.
So right? Good enough for Paul. It's good enough for Paul. Text Mars. Yeah. First of all, I think that it's important that you just got to remember, yes, you have the Holy Spirit, and the illumination of the Holy Spirit that comes to us allows the Scripture to be conviction to us. If you don't have the Spirit, there are very smart people who read the Bible rightly from the culture and can interpret what they were saying, but they don't give a rip what it means. They're not convicted by it. It doesn't challenge them because they don't have the presence of the Spirit of God to lead them into the truth. Like they have the truth now, but they don't care. And so it's the Spirit of God leads you into the truth. He doesn't just like declare it all, we could get into all that aspect, but the danger is that also that the Spirit of God inspired men to write it. And when he inspired these people to write it and the editors to edit it, he didn't just knock them out. They wake up and they had a book that were the words that the Spirit of God wrote with their hand like they were a pen. No, the view of inerrancy and inspiration, or go with inspiration. The view of inspiration is that God used their life, their vocabulary, their experiences. They were specifically put in a situation to where they were able, when they wrote, they were writing the words that God desired for them to put down. And I believe that he was guiding their mind. He couldn't just, he's not going to insert a word they don't know. That's just like, you don't wake up and go like, I knew, we're not in the Matrix where we wake up with new vocabulary suddenly because the Spirit of God dropped new words in our brains. Though there's a set of knowledge that he's working from with the editors and everything so that the book that he intends gets produced. That being said then, though the Spirit of God's in me, I don't have that set of knowledge from that time period. And so there are these gaps between what we know now and how we use the word now and how they use that Hebrew word way back when, which is different than how they may even use the Hebrew word today, which is, guess what, different than how a scholar uses the English word and how you're using the English word. So there is so much here that it's like, you have to understand there are big gaps. And there are philosophical gaps and there are historical gaps, and it's these gaps that people ignore. They just think, I can read the Bible and boom, I know what it says. And so they end up reading really odd things into the Bible because they're taking their loosey-goosey language, which we're at the worst state of English that we've ever been at. Our definitions are confused. It's the entire language is morphing. We don't even agree on definitions right now. That we could say that we get the Bible is laughable to me if you're just the average person, because you're not reading normal English books right. So, and the Bible is not an art piece. It's like, well, it's whatever I think it is. It's like, no, that's not how that works. So you have to like literally exit your culture, go in a time machine and drop back into the time period as best as you can to try to understand, like, okay, there are tropes. There's phrases. There are conventions of writing that are being used that everybody uses. And we don't use them. We don't even know the word. We just learning their conventions in the last 20, 30 years. There are ways that that they thought about life that was in their worldview very different than the way that we use the worldview because we're scientifically minded. We have a very robust, we're technologically minded. We have a very different way of examining and viewing and experiencing the world than an ancient Hebrew walking around staring at the stars in the middle of the desert in a Bedouin tent because that's his life, and he knows the earth a lot better than we do. He knows his body a lot better than we do. He knows how to burn the wood. There's just very earthy, real people. So for Nate's question, you can generally understand, I believe, the gospel, the broadest truths.
That Jesus died for your sins, and that
I don't think in the current era of humanity that we're living in, we are further from the culture of the Old Testament and New Testament time periods than any humanity ever, and we're getting further and further away. And that's because, like, if you lived in the 1400s, you don't realize that, yes, dress was different, language was different, but there were so many commonalities. I mean, you still fought with swords, and you still fought with...
You rode on horses.
You rode on horses, and you had wagons, and there were chariots, and everybody walked, and you didn't live outside your village for very long. I mean, yes, maybe they had kings, they had emperors, but they still knew about the emperors. These guys, it's just a different reality. We don't live... Like, the governments are different. The way we think of nations are different. The way that the mobility is massively different. We can go anywhere we want in the globe faster than you could get to another town in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And so you've just got so much difference that you have to be careful. You just got to remember, this is an ancient book from a very different culture. That doesn't mean you can't understand it. I'm not a postmodernist who believes you can't jump to a different culture and understand the culture. I do think that it takes time. And so they call it a hermeneutical spiral, in which your first pass is going to be a good pass, but you're not done. Like, so many Christians are like, well, I've gone through that book before. Yeah, I've gone through the book 4 or 5 times, and I'm always finding something different, some nuance, something I missed because something in the culture comes and sits into it. I'm like, I didn't see that. I learned something in another part of the Bible, and it comes relevant into this New Testament text. I'm going, I never read it. I never saw that. That's totally what they were thinking. And you have to go through that process. Now you go, well, then can we apply it to our lives? Is it actually a book that's applicable? Yeah, I think in general, most of the principles can still be grasped, but you need to be slower at it. You need to ask good questions. Like, I really think having a good study Bible is critical. We shouldn't really just publish Bibles. We should publish study Bibles and only study Bibles. And it's because it's just, there's no reason to just give people a book and just say,
have at it.
Yeah. I mean, so.
And having them looking at words too, because you come across the word inconceivable. And does that really mean what you think it means?
Yes.
Just some deep theology from The Princess Bride.
Things that make you say,
Well, I think it's hard to talk to a modern church about, like, what does it mean what does hermeneutics mean? Why is it important to me? You almost have to make an apologetic for, like, you can read the text wrong and you have to learn. And I think the problem we all have is that we all want to do every gift that's in the church. I do believe there are spirit-led, God-honoring scholars that want to teach the church what the text means, and God has placed them in the body for us to learn from, and that's their gift, and we should let them exercise their gift. There are other people who have other gifts, so you're kind of put into a family. You can't do it all on your own. You can grow in your own, but oftentimes you learn from people who have different gifts than you, and so you always want to grow. It's like, well, that guy has the gift of faith, so I don't have to have faith. So, well, you hang out with that guy and learn from him how he exercises those gifts.
Or utilize him if you know you don't have that gift.
Yeah,
and like, hey,
take from him.
Would you please pray on this for me? Because I know you got that gift of faith, and I'm having faith in the gift of faith. It's like,
so sometimes I think people feel like, well, I don't need anybody's help. I don't need all these scholars. I just need me. And I'm like, that is a scary place to be, because usually we're born into a family, and a family has different gifts and helps each other out. And so you are supposed to read your Bible with a group of people. I think it's actually more difficult if you're not bringing questions about what you're reading. Where are you getting them answered from, and who's answering them?
and again, even that is radically different than the ancient world. You didn't have a Bible. You didn't own one. You couldn't carry the scrolls with you. There weren't enough of them. They were very cherished objects that sat in a synagogue or stored at the church, that were brought out, and then you had to hear them publicly read. And so, you publicly read them and discussed them. You didn't go home with your personal quiet time and no, you heard it read to you, and then you conversed about it, and then you went and lived it. And it was a very different world. And so this is what the Roman Catholic Church was worried about when it came to the Reformation, and everybody gets a Bible. They were like,
the Gutenberg Bible.
We're going to have all these different interpretations. We're not going to really know the truth. And the problem was they had a monopoly on the truth.
Right.
And you couldn't trust that because it had layers of odd traditions and accretions on top of it. And so it has brought about a revelation, a reformation, a transformation. But with it comes a lot of heresy.
Right.
And I always like to say, like, when it comes to these kinds of things, like the Bible does not lie to you. It doesn't. The Bible doesn't lie to you. You know, guess what? God made creation. Creation doesn't lie to you because God made it. It can't lie to you. And the Spirit of God can't lie to you either. But we can misinterpret them. We misinterpret creation. We misinterpret the Bible. We misinterpret the Spirit. I misinterpret my own emotions, for goodness sakes. We need to be a little bit more, in a sense, humbled by the fact that this is a a very robust, very deep, cognitively challenging book. I mean, to just make a mockery of it on a TikTok or something like that, because you think you figured it out, and you're just so not even playing in the same. You're not even on the same planet as the Bible is. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. It would be like, I don't know. I can't even come up with a good analogy.
Well, it's dismissing the most important and relevant book ever to exist that has shaped every aspect of our culture, either whether you think it's good or bad. To just miss it out of hand as if you understand it is, without a little humility, is odd.
Well, and then
you wouldn't do that with Shakespeare. You wouldn't do that with Socrates.
Well, you can imagine if there was a liberal feminist, they pick up the Bible and they want to read it from a liberal feminist perspective called a feminist hermeneutic. And so they're going to read stuff about the patriarchy in there and all these things that aren't actually there. And so it's difficult about that. It'd be like me watching the Barbie movie and wanting to claim that, oh, this is the most like pro-masculine movie ever, and just start interpreting all the ways that it's just an amazing movie that men rule and girls rule or whatever, would drive them crazy.
Yeah.
And because guess what? They had an intention with the movie.
Yeah.
We can't the Bible's the same way. God has an intention with what he wrote. You don't just get to pick it up and read it however you want and then throw your dispersions at it. So for the sake of my son, and his question is just like, again, you got to do some good background, and there's lots and lots and lots of available free information out there that can help you get to the background of it, ask good questions, see what was going on, and then there's a process that you can go through in a Bible study and come to a decent conclusion what it means. Then you apply it to your life. But it's always good to ask yourself, do I really know what that word means?
Does it mean what you think it means?
I don't think it means what you think it means.
You could be using that word.
My name is Montigo Montoya.
Inigo
Montoya.
Montoya.
Okay.
You killed my father. You killed my name. Prepare to die.
All
Ridiculous.
All right. It is time to go, ladies and gentlemen.
It is. Inconceivable.
It is.
But hey, we are glad that you joined us, and we hope that you have a good rest of your day. Obviously, we're out of gas. We hope that your gas and your car is still going, but and you enjoyed this time. If you have any questions for us, please. That we opened up a bunch of cans of all kinds of interesting stuff. Do not be embarrassed. We love your questions, and we would love to just address them as best we can. Drop us a line at rabbittrail@obcc.church. That's rabbittrail@obcc.church, and feel free to share and do all that fun stuff out there so Brent's ego is completely,
Don't forget
completely
to cheat,
better.
ladies and gentlemen.
So anyway, God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your week.
Boom, chug-a-lug.